Hello, good evening. How are you? Have you had a good day? Have you had a good weekend? Have you had a good start to the week? Easter week, isn't it? I always like Easter. It's not so sort of commercial as Christmas, is it? And very meaningful to me anyway. And so I hope that we can celebrate it with friends this weekend. We can sort of celebrate with some people now, can't we? Which is good. Anyway, this week by Fern's Fireside, I am reading Coming Home. Now, this is a kind of a follow-on to the postcard that I was reading last week, in that it picks up the story of Ella, young Ella. But you don't need to have read both to get the picture. You see what I mean? It's also, I wrote this in 2018, and my mum wasn't very well. In fact, she died that year. And it's funny, isn't it, how these things are. I had no idea that would happen to her. She was amazing. But in the beginning, I've written this little quote that I found, which is, "A mother is always the beginning. She is how things begin." And that was written by someone called Amy Tan. And she's quite right, isn't she? A mother is always the beginning. She is how things begin. So, to mothers everywhere, look what we've started. Here we go. This is the prologue. Trevay, 1993. The house was still. Her heart was hammering. She could hear it in her ears, hear her breath whistle in her nostrils. She tried to quieten both. In the dark of her bedroom, she strained her ears to listen for any noise in the house. The church bell rang the half hour, 11:30. She'd gone up to bed early, her mother asking her if she was feeling all right. "Yeah, I'm fine." She'd shrugged off the caring hand her mother had placed in the small of her back. "If you're sure," her mother let her hand rest by her hip. "Is it your period?" She had hunched her shoulders and scowled at that. "I'm just tired." "Ella and Henry had a lovely day with you on the beach," said her mother, bending her head to look up into her daughter's downcast eyes. "You're doing so well." Sennan shrugged and turned to head for the stairs. Her father came out of the kitchen. "Those little uns of yours asleep, are they?" "She's tired, Bill," replied her mother. "An early night," her father smiled. "Good for you." She could feel her father's loving gaze on her back as she ascended the stairs. She wouldn't turn round. "Good night, Sennan," chirped her mother. "Sleep tight." Her parents had finally gone to bed almost an hour ago, and now she picked up the heavy rucksack she'd got for her 15th birthday. It had been used once, on a disastrous first weekend of camping for the Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award. Even now, the bone-numbing cold of one night in a tent and the penetrating rain of the 20-mile walk the following day made her stomach clench. Back home, she refused to complete any more challenges and dropped out. She used Henry as an excuse. He'd just started to walk, and her mother expected her to come home from school every weekend and do the things a mother should do for her child. On top of that, she was expected to work hard for her exams. Why the hell would she want to learn how to read a map and cook a chicken over a campfire as well? And then Ella had come along. Sennan had sat in the summer heat of the exam hall, 6 weeks from her due date, hating the kicks of her unborn child, hating being pitied by her teachers. She rubbed a hand across her eyes and tightened the straps to the rucksack. What a model daughter she had been. 2 babies by a father unknown, and now she was leaving them. Her A-levels, her overindulgent liberal lefty parents who had supported her through it all, and leaving Cornwall. She hovered on the landing outside Henry and Ella's room. She didn't go in. She knew she'd never leave if she saw them, smelt them. She kissed her hand and placed it on their nameplates on the door. Downstairs, she tiptoed through the hall. Bertie, the cat, ran from under the hall table with a mew. She put her hand to her mouth to stop her startled cry, then bent down to tickle him. "Bye, Bert. Have a nice life." Slowly, she turned the handle of the downstairs loo and edged in carefully, making sure that the rucksack didn't knock over the earthenware plant pot with its flourishing spider plant. Bert came with her, and she had to nudge him out with her boot before closing the door behind him. The front door was too noisy to leave by. The loo window always stuck a little, and the trick was to give it a little thump with your palm. She held her breath, listened for any noise from upstairs. Nothing. She wound the small linen hand towel around her fist. It took 3 good pushes, each stronger than the last, before the window swung open noiselessly. She threw the rucksack out first and then carefully climbed out after it. She pushed the window shut and stood in the moonlit, tiled courtyard. In a corner was Henry's little trike, and in another, Ella's beach pushchair. She had meant to take both in case of rain, but had forgotten. She looked up to the night sky, cloudless. It would be a dry night. She picked her way over the sand pit, held in a wooden box that her father had made for her when she was little, and now given fresh life to with a coat of scarlet paint, and made her way to the gate. The hinge creaked a little, but before it had shut itself, she was already gone. Around the corner, down the lane, and out to the bus stop by the harbour. Part 1. Adella's Only Love. Pendragon, 2018. Kit Beecham stirred the tomato soup in front of him. "When will your brother get here?" Ella put her bowl down on the kitchen table and sat opposite him. "Why, nervous?" Kit looked up into Ella's golden eyes. "Should I be?" "He'll adore you," she reassured him. "And if he doesn't, you'll know about it pretty quickly." "Oh, blimey." Kit really was nervous. Ella loved that her boyfriend was taking this meeting seriously. Her brother was the only family she had left. His opinion counted for everything. She picked up her spoon and replied, "Tomorrow lunchtime. He's getting the early train down from Paddington. Should be at Bodmin by about 1. Ella pushed curls the same colour as her soup behind her ears and dipped her spoon into the steaming bowl. She sipped and burnt her top lip. "Ow." "Careful," Kit said, blowing on his own spoon. Freckles bounced across her face as she opened her mouth to fan cool air onto her burning tongue. Kit tore at the centre of his crusty French roll and handed her some. "It'll cool you down." She took it gratefully. For a couple of minutes neither spoke, quietly enjoying their simple lunch. "I suppose," frowned Kit, "I don't want to make a bad impression." Ella giggled. "I think Henry's the one who needs to be more worried. He can be a total arse." She pulled Kit's hand over the table and rubbed it against her cheek. "You'll be the brother he never had." Kit let his hand trail down her cheek and chin. "He's very important to you, isn't he?" She blew on another spoonful of soup and added, "We are the last of the Talons." Kit wiped the final crust of bread around his bowl. "Why do you think the solicitor wants to see you both?" "Oh, the usual, I expect. Mum has either hidden herself so well that she doesn't want to be found, or she's dead." Ella put her spoon down. Kit saw the lost child and the woman in front of him. "He'll find her," he said with a certainty he didn't feel. "I don't know," Ella sighed. "Pass me your bowl." "I'll wash up," he said, glancing out of the window and looking at the sky. "Fancy a walk? The dogs could do with one. Or are you too tired after all that vacuuming for your brother?" Ella looked over at Terry and Celia, who were lounging in their separate beds, looking as disdainful as only Afghan hounds can. "Well, doggies, fancy a walk?" Terry managed a discreet waft of his feathery tail, while Celia sighed and raised an eyebrow. "What a pair of lazy gits," laughed Ella. She put her arm out to Kit as he passed on his way to the sink. "But can it be to Trevay? I need to pick up some steak to make pasties for Henry tomorrow." I said Harry because I have a Harry. Henry couldn't wait to get out of London. When the most recent solicitor's letter had arrived last week, he'd managed to wangle a decent chunk of leave in Cornwall. He wasn't too bothered about the letter. Another routine meeting. He and Ella had had so many since their grandmother had died. The problem lay with his unreliable, irresponsible mother, who had left him and Ella when they were just tiny. He'd been about 2 and Ella just over 1. She'd disappeared to God knew where for God knows what whim and never came back. It had left Granny and Popper heartbroken, not to mention Henry, who still had vague memories of his mother, sitting on her lap, being folded into her arms. Stop it, he told himself. Hopefully the solicitor will tell him and Ella that his mother was lost forever, or dead. Either would be fine with him. Then at last they could sort out Granny's estate and move on with their lives. He returned his attention to the work on his desk. 2 reports to finish, 3 phone calls to make, and a handover to his colleague on how to deal with any issues that might arise in his absence. And then, he rubbed his hands gleefully, then Cornwall, here he came. Ella and Kit closed the door of Marguerite Cottage and waved at their nearest neighbour, Simon Cantor, the vicar of Holy Trinity Church. Good afternoon, Simon greeted them as he walked through the churchyard. Beautiful day, enjoy it. We will, Ella called back. He was right, it was a lovely day, and as she waited for Kit to open up the car and load the dogs, Ella took time to absorb the moment. The Pendragon village green, with its cluster of old and new homes around it. Above her, tiny white clouds puffed and floated in the bluest of skies, the smell of gorse on the wind, bringing with it the light rumble of surf on Shell Sand Beach. Come on, jump in, said Kit, jangling the keys of his slightly aged car. She climbed in. It's a day to be happy. It's always a day to be happy for me, he replied, reversing out of the short drive. She laughed. Oh, you're always so bloody happy. It's exhausting. I'm a glass half full man. Don't I know it? My healthy scepticism, hoping for the best, expecting the worst, balances us perfectly. She waved and smiled as she spotted Queenie, owner of the village store and harbinger of all news, taking a quick fag break outside her shop. Queenie, however, is on permanent standby for disaster, like Henry. Kit shoved the car into first gear and set off around the village green towards Trevay. So your brother's a miserable sod, then? Oh, yeah, but he cheers up when he has beer inside him. Oh, I'm the man for that job. They drove in friendly silence up the dappled lane that took them past their local, the Dolphin Pub, and out to the top road, headed towards Trevay. Ella had always loved this road, even as a child living in Trevay with her brother and grandparents. She unwound the window and watched as the tree and small cottages gave way to high hedges and gateways, offering tantalising vistas of the sea beyond. As the road reached its highest point, the trees and farms opened to acres of green fields, with the glittering Atlantic below, crashing onto the rocks of the headland that sheltered her childhood village. Right, that's 13 minutes. I've gone over, but I don't care. I will see you tomorrow night, 6:30, yes? I look forward to that. And we'll pick up the story and we'll pick up Henry from the station. So I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good evening. Bye. Hello, good evening. How are you? Have a good day? I had a good day. It was all right. Everything's fine. Writing a bit more of a new book. But it's lovely to sit here in the evenings and read a story to you if you care to listen. If you remember, the book this week is called Coming Home, and we know that Ella and Henry's grandparents are probably dead. Her mother, they don't know where she's gone. She left them when they were babies. She was only coming up for 16 or something. She was very young. Kit Ella is living in Cornwall with Kit, her boyfriend, and Henry, her brother, is on his way down to visit because they've got to see a solicitor about her mother and grandmother's estate. So here we go. The rattle of a taxi in the drive heralded Henry's arrival. I'll just check the time, yes. The rattle of a taxi in the drive heralded Henry's arrival. He's here! Ella ran to the front door and opened it. Henry! She charged out of the house and ran at him, smothering him in a hug and kisses. I've missed my bro. Ooh, let me pay the driver, he said, disentangling himself as best he could. As he got his bag from the back seat and handed the driver his fare, he saw a man he assumed must be Kit. He gave him a quick scan. 30-ish. Checked shirt and shorts. Nice tan. Looked okay. He put his bag into his left hand and extended his right. You must be Kit. I'm Henry. Henry, good to meet you. It was Kit's turn to run a discerning assessment over Henry. Long legs, expensive jeans and jacket, white open-necked shirt, flash watch, but he looked okay. Ella looped her arms through each of the boys and dragged them into the house. Welcome to Marguerite Cottage. Inside the hall, Henry dropped his bag on the flagstones and looked around him. Very nice, Elsbells. Come into the garden. Tea, coffee? I can make a jug of Pimm's. Henry followed her through the lounge with Kit and out through the double doors into the pretty garden. You've landed in your bum in butter, haven't you, Ellie? Very nice. Yes, I have, Ella replied, squeezing her shoulders to her ears and grinning in delight. And I've got pasties for you, homemade. Fancy a pint? Asked Kit. Do I? Henry smiled. With an offer like that, if Ella doesn't marry you, I will. Ella was mortified and dug Henry in the ribs. Shut up. Just saying, he said, clutching his side. Will the pasties keep for an hour? Yes, go on. They'll keep. I'll take your bag up to your room. You're in Kit's studio for now. Well, I'll take it up later. It's heavy. He opened it and hauled a bulging carrier bag out. Here, take this bag. It's got a huge pile of post for you. When you left me in London, I didn't think you'd be falling in love and not coming back. Ella couldn't help blushing from her cheeks. Oh, God, you're so embarrassing. Kit saved her. Oh, well, neither of us expected to fall in love, but we did. I love your sister very much. Henry half closed his eyes and weighed up this open declaration. Good on you. Now, don't mucker about or I'll flatten you. Fair enough, Kit smiled. Now, how about that pint? Ella, do you want to come? No, thanks. You two go and get to know each other. I'll make myself a Pimm's and have a look through the post Henry's brought. She waved the boys off with their promise to be only an hour or so and took the Waitrose bag of post to the garden. Getting a glass of Pimm's, she settled herself at the garden table and sifted through the mail. The piles in front of her grew tediously. Catalogues, charity requests, bank statements, a postcard from an old school friend now living in Peru, pension firms, insurance firms, funeral savings plan, and a letter from a publisher. Months before, she'd written and illustrated a children's book called Hedgerow Adventures. She had hoped that her departed granny would guide her to a fruitful contract. She opened the envelope. Dear Miss Talon, Ray Hedgerow Adventures, thank you for your submission. Unfortunately, this is not the sort of book we would publish. We will return the manuscript under separate cover, yours, etc., blah, blah, blah. She sat back and blew out a long breath of frustration. Granny, she said, you got me excited for a moment. Ah, well, c'est la vie. She picked up her Pimm's and took a long, cool, self-commiserating mouthful. Her phone buzzed. It was Henry. Hi, Henry, is everything okay? Have you looked at your emails? No, I've been going through the post. So much crap. Check them now, he said urgently. Okay, hang on. She put her phone on speaker and looked at the screen. There was an email waiting to be opened. I've got it. It's from Granny's solicitor. Open it. She did so, and as she read it, her heartbeat began to accelerate. Oh, my God, she whispered. It can't be true. It is true. Henry's voice was gruff with anger. Ella's hand was shaking as she gripped the phone. Swallowing hard to stop any tears, she said, Our mother is alive? Yes, said Henry, and she wants to see us. He was having difficulty keeping the shock from his voice. As soon as he'd read the message, relaxing with a pint on the Dolphin's Oak bar and chatting to Kit, he'd excused himself and gone to the relative privacy of the pub car park to phone Ella. He was scuffing the gravel with his shoes. I can't believe she's got the nerve. He bit his lip, his face the definition of rage and pain. After all these years, he pushed his free hand into his floppy fringe and pulled his hair. She's bloody alive. Well, I can tell you now, we are not seeing her. Ella sat down. But she's our mother. She lost the right to call herself that years ago. Henry, this is shock talking. We need time to think about it. No, we don't. There's only one reason she'd come back. Because Granny's solicitor has told her that Granny is dead and that she is in for an inheritance. That's all there is to it. Ella loved her brother very much, but she didn't always agree with him. Well, it must have been a shock for her too to hear that her mother was dead, her father too. Henry snorted and ran his hands through his floppy blonde hair again. Well, it was a bit of a shock for me too, you know, when I heard that my mum had run away. I was only 2. I know. Ella looked at the garden she and Kit had started to plant. I can't imagine how she could leave you. She knew you. It was easier for me. I was just a baby. She didn't have time to know me. I don't have a clue what she was like, and that's why I'd like to see her. Henry sat on the wall of the pub's entrance, all the adrenaline leaving him. I don't know what to think. I was hoping they wouldn't find her, or if they did, that she'd died. Don't say that. Ella flopped into her squashy sofa. Is Kit still with you? He's inside. I saw the email and came out to tell you first. He doesn't know. Come home, the pair of you. Come home now. Ella had been hugging herself with joy just 10 minutes ago. How quickly everything can change for the worse. Just checking the time. Ella took Henry's bag up to Kit's small studio and put it next to the single bed. It was getting on for late afternoon, and through the open window a blackbird was singing in the magnolia tree. Instantly anger rose in her. How dare the bloody birds be so happy, while her world was turned upside down. She shut the window with a bang, making the bird fly off. Good riddance, she thought to herself. Downstairs she heard Kit's car pull up. She ran down and opened the front door. Kit was looking serious, as if there'd been a terrible accident, and he now had the responsibility of the fallout, which he had, she supposed. Henry was pale and blowing out his cheeks in a childhood mannerism that always signalled upset. Hi, she said softly. Kit came to her immediately and put his arms around her. He felt the softness and sweetness of her incredible red curls, then stood arm's length from her, his hands on her shoulders. You okay? She shook her head and at last felt hot tears springing to her eyes. Not really. Kit shepherded brother and sister into the kitchen and made them sit down. You both need a drink. Tea or alcohol? Ella settled for a cup of tea, while Henry and Kit had large gin and tonics. Right, said Kit, pulling out a chair from the table and sitting down. Tell me exactly what has happened. Ella looked at Henry. Do you want to tell him? She asked. Henry shrugged in reply and looked at his hands, clenching the icy glass. She looked at Kit. The solicitor has found our mother and she wants to see us. Kit was looking at her attentively. What do you mean she wants after all this time? Granny's money, said Henry flatly. That's what she wants, I think. Or, said Kit, trying to sound positive, she might be coming because she wants to see you two. After all, she hasn't seen you for almost 25 years. Henry picked up his glass and drank. Ella swallowed hard. The thing is, Henry has memories of her. Nice ones, I think, Henry grunted. They had had time to get to know each other, you see. It was much more painful for him. She looked at her brother. Well, I should think so. Henry said nothing but looked at the floor. Whereas I don't remember anything about her. I mean, she left when I was only just over a year old, said Ella, still watching Henry. And that's why I want to see her. Henry glared at her. Really? Ella twiddled her fingers anxiously. I want to know what she looks like. Do we look alike? What's she been doing? Why did she leave us? She wiped her nose as a tear ran down her cheek. Everything, really. Henry was angry. She's one selfish cow who doesn't deserve to be listened to. I wouldn't be surprised if she's lied through her teeth anyway. She might not even be our mother, just some strange woman who thinks she could get lucky. I wouldn't believe a word she said. But Henry, we must try and then decide whether we want to be friends or not. Friends? What are you talking about? She's a mad woman. We don't know anything about her. Correction, we know that she had 2 children by the time she was 17, and she never told her own parents who the father or fathers were. And despite Granny and Grandad being kind and supportive to her, she ran away in the night and never looked back. What kind of person does that? A sad person, Ella said quietly. A person who finds themselves in a really hard place at the start of their adult life and can't cope. People run away all the time, every day. She was not in her right mind. Why didn't she come back? Demanded Henry. Well, she was scared, Ella said. Once you've done something like that, maybe there is no coming back. Henry gave a short laugh. Really? Not to have any curiosity about how your children turned out, not even to see your own parents, who, in case you had forgotten, never recovered from the worry of what might have happened to her. Ella drained her cup of tea, gripped by a sudden anger at his unkindness. She scraped her chair back and took her cup to the sink. She kept her back to her brother. Have you no empathy? There was a tea bag in the sink. She fished it out and put it in the food bin. She was just a young girl, Henry, one who got herself in a mess and wanted to change that. How are we doing? Yes, 12.5 minutes, I'm sorry to say. But let's pick this up again tomorrow and hear a bit more about, about Sennan's parents, the granny and granddad to Ella and Henry. Very sad story. I mean, people do disappear and walk out for all sorts of reasons, don't they? But this one, we'll find out later. Thank you for joining me. Good night. See you tomorrow. Bye. Hello. Good evening. Aren't these light nights lovely? Just to be able to go out and have a little walk in the setting sunshine or whatever is just lovely, isn't it? A bit later than usual. So here we are. This is day 3 of coming home. And I'm going to take you now to Agra in India. Have you ever been to Agra? You know, it's where the Taj Mahal is. It's a very busy, bustling Indian town, as all Indian towns are. And it's gorgeous. I went there a while ago, years ago actually, on a cycling trip. And we cycled from Agra to Jaipur. And I fell in love with India. It's just wonderful. People are wonderful. Great senses of humour, and even though they live in, not the luxury that we live in, they are cheerful and so generous. I love it. I love it. So I decided I would make India the place where Ella and Henry's long-lost mother, who walked out on them when they were babies, this is where I thought she'd be found. She'd be in India, having disappeared for 25 years. So here we go. Agra, India, 2018. Sennan was nervous, more than nervous. What was going on in Cornwall? Her solicitor had promised to phone as soon as he'd heard back from Ella and Henry, and she'd been restless all morning. She walked to the shuttered windows of her hotel room and looked down onto the bustle of the street market. She could almost feel the heat and smell and the dust through the glass. It was monsoon season, and although the clouds had now cleared, the last downpour had left deep puddles on the muddy street and in the awnings of the market stalls. She watched as a young woman in a rose-pink sari stepped out into the busy road and neatly sidestepped a couple of hungry dogs who took a sniff at her shopping, a plastic bag filled with colourful vegetables and herbs. A passing tuk-tuk beeped his horn, and she waved at the driver in recognition. Rows of golden bangles slipping up her arm and glinting in the hot sun. Sennan watched as the woman continued her journey until she was no longer in view. How jealous she was of that woman. She began pacing her hotel room once again. What had she done? She twisted her wedding ring and stared at the phone by the bed, willing it to ring. The letter that had started this turmoil was next to the phone, a letter postmarked Cornwall. Cornwall. She'd walked away a long time ago. She thought of a quote from The Go-Between. The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. Who wrote that? If Kaffir was here, he would know. Kaffir. One of the most erudite men she knew. Not that she knew many men. Her life hadn't been all roses, and right now it was just the thorns. She sat on the bed, closed her eyes, and began her private ritual of summoning Trevay in her mind's eye and walking its narrow streets and lanes. What were the little boats at the harbour doing now? Would any of the ones she remembered still be working, or were they left in the silt, their hulks rotting down to skeletons? Or perhaps they'd been dragged up to the sheds where all boats rested, used and unused. She could smell the seaweed and the salt, hear the gulls laughing, the splash of water as children launched their crab lines into the deep harbour. Her mother painting at the easel on the beach, her washed-out linen shirts and faded trousers glowing in the sun. Popper sitting at his pottery wheel, the shiny slip of water and clay covering his hands to his elbows. She dared for a moment to think about Henry, but as always the electric nerve pain of the thought stopped her. She couldn't even summon his face now, or Ella's. She had been a wicked woman, and now with the letter from Cornwall, they had found her and would make her pay. It had come like a ghost summoning her to her grave. There were several old addresses written on the envelope as it had chased her around the globe before finding her here in India. When she'd read it, locked in her bathroom, away from any inquisition, the sense of fear had almost compelled her to run away again. The letter told her that her father had died some years ago, her mother just 3 years ago. They had died intestate, had made no will, so she was the sole heir to the estate. The house had been sold for a good price when the solicitor, acting as a trustee, had rightly thought the market was at its highest. That money was now in a high-interest account, and it was hers. She or her solicitor should come to Cornwall. All that she needed to be done was to prove her identity and sign some forms. She didn't even have to come to Cornwall. She could send a solicitor as her representative. There was nothing about her children. It took several days before she could formulate her reply. In it, she expressed a desire to meet Henry and Ella and would only return to Cornwall if they wanted to see her. The solicitor agreed to phone her when he had their answer. She lay on the bed and allowed memories of her childhood to fill her thoughts. She was on the beach at Shellsand Bay. Her father, nut-brown and strongly muscled, was swinging her round and round. He was smiling, his bright blue eyes twinkling in his tanned face, and his deep laugh making her giggle. "Daddy!" "Bill, darling, she might be sick," said her mother. "Are you going to be sick?" he asked Sennan. "No," she giggled. "Would you like to come swimming with me and Mum?" "Yes." He put her down on the warm sand. "Get your rubber ring and we'll look for the mermaids, shall we?" Sennan ran to her mother. "Mummy, Daddy's taking us swimming." She pulled at the slender, elegant hand of her mother. "Come on." Her father stood ready in his dark blue swimming shorts. Her mother smiled. "Of course, let me just sort myself out." Adella had been painting in the small sketchbook she always carried with her, capturing the likeness of fishermen mending their nets, or lobster pots piled high on the harbour, or the holidaymakers napping in the sun. "Oh, I like that," said Bill, peering over her shoulder at her watercolour of the beach scene in front of them. "Good colours." Adella stood up and put her hands on her husband's bare chest. She kissed him. "Thank you." He kissed her back, then held her slim body in his arms. She pressed her cheek against him and smelt the warmth of his skin. "I do love you," she said, "and I love you." Senna bashed her mother on the back of the knees with her sand spade. "Come on!" Bill and Adella laughed, and taking Sennan in a hand each, they ran to the waves, swinging her between them. She had grown up surrounded by so much love and kindness. How could she have turned her back on them? Now we're going back to Cornwall. It's chapter 3, Cornwall, but in 1972. How are we doing? Oh, we're good. Adella was Cornish to the heart. Her parents had been wealthy landowners from Bodmin, her father the quintessential country squire, and her mother a beauty of her day. Adella had wanted for nothing, the only awkward thing being that they were none of the things that she actually wanted. Money, comfort, beauty, beaux, all were hers for the taking, but it wasn't what she longed for. She dreamt of being a great artist, living a rackety bohemian life in London, preferably Pimlico, which she had heard about and liked the sound of. And when she finally told them, it caused much consternation for her parents, who had planned a husband, Anthony, handsome and untroubled by intellect, with a rather lovely medieval manor house on the banks of the Tamar. But it was not to be. At the age of 18, she won a place at the Slade School of Art on Gower Street, Bloomsbury. She refused her parents' offer of a nice little flat in Baker Street and instead put her name down for a flat share with any of the new female students she would be joining up with. She would find out who when she arrived for her first term. Her mother, a woman with a great capacity for organisation, decided her talents would be best spent taking her only child to Truro for the day and kitting her out with a new wardrobe of fashionable dresses and accessories and, as an afterthought, paints. Come early September, her father ordered his cherished Morris 6 to be serviced, polished and refuelled and drove her up to London in what he noted was record time. 9.5 hours. Would have been even quicker if it hadn't been the thick fog that had rolled over Dartmoor and a puncture on the A38. Adella had waved him off to his club where he would spend the night before the return journey the following day, and she set about her new life with enthusiasm. Her new flat off Marylebone High Street was small but clean, and her flatmates were fun. There was Elsie, who was Irish and smoked, and Keena, who tied her hair with bright cotton scarves and wore boys' jeans. She was from Jamaica and was the most exotic person Adella had ever met. And together they shared everything, including Keena's fashion sense. And so within days, Adella's pretty dresses and gloves were taken off their hangers and bundled into Adella's suitcase under her single bed. Now, Adella hunted the jumble sales and bric-a-brac stalls for overgrown jumpers and men's shirts, which she knotted at the waist, and loose canvas trousers. For a brief moment she tried smoking too, but she really couldn't get on with it, so took instead to drinking halves of bitter when she met her fellow students in the pub. The first year flew by, and returning to Cornwall the following summer, she was surprised by how much she had missed it. Her mother wanted to know all the London gossip. She had none. Well, have you been to Harrods? No. At which restaurants had you dined? Again, none. Had she met any nice boys, as she'd be delighted to invite them to tea? No, but if I do, I shall let them know. And why do you wear such shabby clothes? I like them. It was towards the end of August that Adella took herself up to the golden fields of swaying corn in order to paint the local men who were getting her father's harvest in. Her mother had strung string bags of bread, cheese and pasties on her handlebars, and in her panniers she had placed bottles of cider to give the men a snack. When Adella had arrived, the men, stripped to their vests, had cheered and stopped work to enjoy their break. She knew most of them by sight, if not by name, as they'd been getting the harvest in for as many years as she could remember. Perching on whatever they could find, the bolder amongst them asked about her new life in London. She told them about the London pubs she visited and the life-drawing classes where the models weren't actually naked. There was one boy, wide-shouldered and sunburnt, with very blue eyes and very white teeth, who lay on his shirt and listened, but didn't look at her or join in. She'd never seen him before. When the snack was done and both thirsts and appetites quenched, old John, her father's stockman, called the men back to their labours. The new boy thanked her for the food and drink and introduced himself as Bill. His hand was rough and strong in hers as she shook it. Will you be here tomorrow? He'd asked. I'm not sure, she replied. He smiled as he put his cap on and picked up his pitchfork. Nice to meet you, he said, and strode back up the field. Oh, that's where we have to stop again. I'm so sorry about that, but obviously that's Adella meeting her new, as yet not husband, but he does become the husband. Am I telling you too much? Sorry. Anyway, look, see you tomorrow, Thursday, 6:30, here by my fireside, which is out because the sun's out. Isn't it lovely? I'll see you soon. God bless. Bye. Hello, how are you? How's your Thursday been? Oh, my glasses are dirty. It's been nice, hasn't it? It's been all right. I got some laundry done, doing some more writing. Met a man about the double glazing windows. One of them's blown, so I'll get that sorted out. It's all just trivia, isn't it? Just keeps us going, keeps us going before, we're fully free, which might take some time, as we know. Anyway, here we go. Coming home. This is our fourth reading, and last night we know that finally Adella has met Bill, the man who's about to be her husband. He's invited her out on a date. She had nothing to wear. The bed was littered with half a dozen garments which she'd had for years, amongst which was an old dress she'd had since she was 14. It was too short and much too tight. She's got a pretty cotton skirt with a broken zip and a horrible taffeta bridesmaid dress she'd had to wear for her cousin's wedding. Red-faced from her bath and the putting on and taking off of so many things, she sat on the edge of the bed in despair. There was a soft knock at the door. "It's Mother. Can I help?" Adella sighed and flopped backwards onto the bed in despair. "Come in." Her mother put her head around the door. "I thought so. I found this. Any good?" She was holding a Liberty print cotton summer dress. "I bought it ages ago, in a sale. It's too young for me. Too small too. Try it." In the mirror, even Adella was pleased with her reflection. The dress was simple and hung a little loose on her, but it was perfect. Her mother had brushed her hair into a neat ponytail and had attempted a little rouge and lipstick, but Adella had been firm about saying no, and finally her mother had stepped back. "You'll do," she said. From downstairs they heard the bang of the old door knocker and her father calling up the stairs, "Prince Charming has arrived. Cinders." Bill had borrowed his father's car and drove Adella through the lanes and down to the pretty fishing village of Trevay, his shirt-sleeved arm leaning on the open window. He chatted about this and that, and gradually the knot in Adella's stomach began to loosen. As they came down the hill towards the harbour, Adella saw that the fishing boats were coming in on the tide, ready to land their catches on the quay. The sun was bouncing on the surface of the rippling sea, making the light sparkle and flash. "I love it here," she said. "I haven't been for ages. I could paint that sea every day." Bill parked the car outside the Golden Hind pub, picked up his jacket from the back seat and helped Adella inside. "What will you drink?" he asked. "Half a bitter, please." She didn't see his amused smile as she was looking around the dark and cosy bar. "It's nice in here." Paying the barman, he carried his pint and her half towards the door. "Let's take our drinks outside." The sun was beginning to set and the day was losing its warmth. She shivered a little as they sat on the harbour wall across from the pub and watched the fishing boats unload. "Would you like my jacket?" he asked. "Or I have a jumper in the car." "You'll need your jacket, but the jumper would be lovely, thank you." "Don't go away." He set off for the car, Adella watching him. He was undeniably handsome, tall and muscular, with an easy smile, the sort of man she thought that one could fall in love with. She checked herself and looked back at the boats. She was only 18, and she and Elsie and Keena had sworn to each other they would play the field as men did, would never settle down with the first man they met. She looked over to him again. He was leaning into the car and reaching for something on the back seat, and when he reappeared, he had the jumper in his hand and looked over at her with such a look that her heart jumped a little. She quickly returned her gaze to the boats, as if the unloading of their catches was of the utmost interest. She decided that when he came back, she would be polite and cool. She would give no indication that she might find him attractive. Adella waited a few seconds longer, then glanced in his direction to see what was keeping him. She saw at once. 2 girls were talking to him, 2 pretty girls. One had her hand on his chest as she was talking to him. The other was pulling at his hand. Adella's hand was shaking so much that she had to put her drink down. She looked over again. He was pointing at her, and all 3 of them were laughing. At her? She felt her breath quicken and her cheeks redden. How could she escape? Too late. He was coming towards her. "Adella, meet a couple of old friends. Barbara." "Hello," pouted Barbara, still holding Bill's hand. "And Jill." "Hi," said Jill, giving Adella a full top-to-toe sweep. "Bill," Adella stood. "I'm so sorry, I'm not feeling very well. I'll get the bus back." Bill frowned. "Don't be silly, I'll drive you." "No, it's no trouble. I'll get the bus or ring my father. I don't want to spoil your evening." "Spoil my—" Bill was confused and exasperated. "We've only just got here." Jill butted in. "Oh, she'll be fine on the bus. Stay with us, we'll have a laugh." Adella stood fixed to the point. Was she really so easily to be shaken off? Bill shook out his jumper and placed it around Adella's shoulders. Adella needs to go home, and I shall take her. In the car, Adella said nothing. Her emotions were running high. She was elated that he'd brushed those girls off, but angry that he even knew them. Who were they? How well did he know them? Her father had said that all the girls were after him. Well, she wasn't. This would be the first and last time she'd accept a date from him. Her eyes slid over to look at him. His profile in the dark of the car was strong, but his lips were tensed as he ran his hand through his hair. He felt her gaze and looked over at her. How are you feeling? Okay. Are you sure it wasn't something else? She wondered if he was teasing her. Too much sun, maybe, she said. You don't get sun in London, he was teasing her. She turned to look out of her window and didn't give him the courtesy of an answer. I was looking forward to tonight, he said. What did I do wrong? Nothing? Was it the girls? She shook her head, refusing to look at him. I grew up with them. They're fun. Good for them. He slowed the car in the lane leading down to her family farm. The headlights picked out an owl on a gatepost as he brought the car to a halt and turned the engine and headlights off, and then they sat without speaking. Only the gentle ticking of the engine cooling down broke the silence. Adella, he said gently. Why have we stopped? She asked. I want a chance to talk to you without interruption. We've got at least 2 hours before your parents will be expecting you back. He settled in his seat, his back to the driver's door. What's the matter? Nothing. Feeling better? Yes. Good. So talk to me. About what? Tell me about who you are and what you want out of life. I'm Adella Tripp, I'm 18, I'm an artist, and I want to make a living from my work. Is that enough? Mm-hmm. Do you have a boyfriend? She shook her head and dared to look into his eyes. Do you have a girlfriend? No, not at the moment. Oh, she smiled. And so who are you and what do you want from your life? Well, right now, I'd like a pint and some fish and chips. That was how I had planned tonight. Oh, sorry I messed it up, she said shyly. I forgive you. He was teasing again. Shall we start afresh? She bit her lip but managed to smile. Yes, please. Good. He turned the engine on and reversed the car. We'll go over to Pendragon Village. There's a great pub there called the Dolphin. Proper beer, good food and quiet. Fancy it? From then on, the evening went smoothly. Bill was an easy person to be around, and Adella made him laugh with her stories of her flatmates and her tutors, 2 of whom were Graham Sutherland and Lucian Freud. He told her about his work with the pottery and the great Bernard Leach who was teaching him. He's a genius, Adella. I'd like you to come down and meet him. That would be lovely. Good. By the way, can you play darts? The board has just come free. She surprised him with her skill at darts and took a game off him straight away. Have you been having lessons? Oh, beginner's luck, she laughed. Or maybe I've spent the last year in London learning to play in our local. Oh, right. Well, if that's the case, he picked up his darts. No more Mr. Nice Guy. The drive back to the house was very different to either of the previous drives that evening. Now they were comfortable together, the small silences between them serene and pleasant. At the front door she thanked him. Will you be up at the harvest tomorrow? He asked. Well, it's my job to bring you all your snack, isn't it? Ah, yes, that'll be the reason you come up. Nothing else. She chewed her lip, hoping and fearing he might kiss her. She tipped her head up to his and in a low voice said, So, see you tomorrow. She half closed her eyes. I'm laughing at how stupidly I did that. She half closed her eyes and waited. He hesitated, then stepped off the front step and walked backwards towards his car. Yeah, see you tomorrow. He opened the driver's door and bent to get in. She watched the way he folded his long legs into the seat and sat down. Being so tall, his head touched the roof. As he started the engine and the car began to pull away, he leant out of the window and said, Did I mention how lovely you look in that dress? She stood for a long time, watching the tail lights grow smaller until they disappeared from sight. It's love. Right, that's 11 minutes. Now, tomorrow's the last one. And I think we'll go back to the present day, Pendragon 2018, and find out how Henry and Ella are doing at the thought of their mother coming home. See you then. Have a lovely evening. Sleep well. Bye. Hello. Gosh, the end of another week. They go so fast, don't they? The days just seem to just keep rolling out. I suppose it's because we don't have too many punctuations, do we? But anyway, here we go. Now, I'm reading Coming Home. This is the final reading of the week. And Bill and Adella, as you know, have met. And this is back in the 70s now. And they are obviously fallen in love. So here we go. Bill and Adella waited for 2 years before they married. Adella wanted to finish her degree, and Bill wanted to make sure he had enough savings to begin married life in a home of their own. Tucked up in the chill of Adella's Marylebone bedroom, they talked of their future. "Do you think we can afford to start a family straight away?" Adella had asked hopefully, her face pressed into the warmth of Bill's chest. "How much do babies cost?" he'd asked. "Not much. I'll ask around the family for the essentials. I'm sure my old pram is stuck in the attic somewhere. We can use the kitchen sink as a bath, and I'll feed the little mite myself, so..." She heard his laugh rumbling in his chest as he tightened his arm around her. "What are you laughing at?" "Your practicality and frugality. Most women would want brand new everything." "Well, I don't. And I have a few books of Green Shield stamps, remember those, that I'm sure would get us a cot." He kissed the top of her head. "And where would we live? This garret of yours is fine for us, but it would be a squeeze for 3 of us, and I don't fancy carrying the pram up and down 3 flights of stairs." "Well, I always imagined us going back to Cornwall," she said quietly. "My parents have spotted a tiny place in Trevey on the harbour." As she lifted her head to check his reaction to this piece of news, he saw the longing in her eyes. Well, I'm not having handouts from your parents." No, nor me. And I hadn't said anything to them about looking for something, honestly." "Then how do they know about it?" "Well, my mother sent me something." Adella shifted herself from his arms and slipped out of bed. She tiptoed across the icy lino and reached for a newspaper stuffed into her handbag and got back to the warmth of the bed as fast as she could. "Here, look." She turned to the properties page and handed it to him. "There," she pointed. He scanned the small advert and blurry picture. "What do you think?" she said, tucking herself around him again. "It's a derelict shop. An old chandler's, actually, but not a residential home. That's why it's such a good price. No indoor bathroom, no bedrooms, no kitchen, and no heating. It'll be freezing. But stuck between those 2 houses as it is, it will keep itself warm." He said nothing. She pressed on. "Bill, it's so pretty, and I don't mind living in a building site, and I can do lots of labouring for you. Between us, we could build the home we really want." He held her anxious gaze. "You really like it?" he said. She nodded, her fingers crossed under the eiderdown. "Don't you?" He said, wanting to keep her in suspense. "We could go down this weekend and take a look at it." She sat up, clutching her hands to her chest. "Could we? Oh, why not?" he said. To their delight, the second-class train compartment was empty. Bill put their small shared suitcase up in the netted luggage rack, while Adella opened up their packed lunch. "It's only egg sandwiches and ginger nuts, I'm afraid," she said, fussing over the greaseproof wrapped packages and passing him one. "Oh, and I've put the last of my chicken soup in the flask." Sitting together, watching as the smoky London scene beyond the glass began to morph into suburbia, then farmland, they munched and chatted and did the Guardian crossword until, leaning their heads together, they fell asleep to the rhythm of the train. Newton Abbot, Exeter and Plymouth sped by in a drowsy haze until the guard, in a comforting West Country voice, called along the corridors, "Bodmin Parkway, next stop, Bodmin." As the bus rattled onto Trevay Harbour and came to a stop, Adella and Bill collected up their bits and jumped off. "There it is," Adella said, with renewed energy, pointing at a very tall, thin building. "I can see the estate agent waiting." They hurried across the road, past the Golden Hind pub, and turned left into the narrow lane where the building stood, squeezed in between its neighbours. It was at least 150 years old, dressed in clapboard, its white paint peeling. It carried 2 floors above the front door. The estate agent greeted them. "Mr. and Mrs. Talon, I presume? Tim Banyan." They all shook hands. "Welcome to the old Chandri." Mr. Banyan began his spiel. "There's been a lot of interest in the property, I can tell you." "Really?" asked Bill, incredulous. Adella glared at him and addressed the agent. "I'm sure it's absolutely gorgeous." Bill shot her a murderous look, and as Mr. Banyan took a set of keys from his pocket and put them in the rusted lock of the warped front door, Bill pulled his wife aside and whispered, "Don't act too keen, he'll bump the price up." Adella tutted and whispered back, "I want him to know we're serious buyers." She pushed past him and followed the agent, who'd given the door a couple of kicks to open it, leaving a lump of damp and rotting wood on the mat, into what had been the shop. "As you see," Mr. Banyan was all pomposity, "all the original fittings and fixtures are still intact." Bill looked at the empty shelves lining the walls and the shop counter covered in dust. "Seen better days," he said. "So much character," countered Adella. Mr. Banyan continued his tour into the room behind the shop, which housed an old Rayburn range and a large butler's sink. "And beyond is the garden." Grandly, he lifted the latch of the old back door and showed them a patch of wasteland no bigger than a couple of wheelbarrows. "Sun all day." Adella could see that Bill was losing interest. "Can we see upstairs?" A steep and narrow staircase took them up to the first floor, which housed 2 small rooms back and front. The second floor was the same. Adella felt certain that Bill would never agree to live here. As he and Mr. Banyan chatted on the tiny landing, she walked towards the window of the uppermost front room, her heels knocking on the bare floorboards. She rubbed the dust and grime from one of the small square panes and looked out. Trevay and its harbour were laid out before her, like a drawing from a child's picture book. She tried the rusty latch, and after a couple of thumps with the heel of her hand, it opened. Sunlight, sea air, and the call of gulls flooded the room. She almost laughed at the simple joyousness of it all. She heard footsteps behind her, followed by Bill's hand on her waist as he stood next to her. She laid her head against his shoulder. "Someone will make this into a lovely home," she sighed. "Yes, we will," he answered. She looked at him, all alert. "What?" "I've put an offer in. Mr. Banyan's going to let us know in a couple of days." She hugged him, then pulled away and pummeled him. "You bugger! I thought you hated it." "Just my poker face." "Oh, darling." She kissed him, and then a horrible thought crossed her mind. "You didn't offer him a stupidly low price, did you? You'll definitely lose it if you have." "I've offered what it's worth to us, which is more than it's worth to anyone else." "I love it." She hopped from one foot to another. "Well, I love it too. It's mad. It's too much work. It's totally impractical. Who buys a building that's as tall as thin as a pencil? Adella laughed and leant on the filthy windowsill to look out at the amazing view. "That's what we'll call it. Pencil House." They got the keys and moved in within 3 weeks. The Rayburn only needed a good service and soon warmed the house through. Bill, always good with his hands, made the old shop counter into a kitchen unit and built a sturdy kitchen tabletop out of the shop's shelves. Adella started upstairs. She swept, she washed and painted everywhere and everything. Slowly, Pencil House was becoming a home. At weekends, they would take themselves off on bus rides, discovering seaside towns and hidden coves, and simply immersing themselves in each other and the life they were building. It was about 4 months into their arrival that Adella began to feel sick in the mornings. The doctor confirmed her pregnancy, and the following spring their daughter arrived. Bill and Adella were as besotted with her as they were with themselves. "What shall we call her?" asked Bill, holding her for the first time by Adella's hospital bed. Adella smiled. "I'd like to call her Sennan," she said. "Sennan?" asked Bill, puzzled. "Why?" She grinned. "Remember that evening on Sennan Cove last summer?" Oh, Bill remembered. Yes, darling, your daughter was conceived on Sennan Cove. A few days later, Bill went to collect Adella and Sennan from the hospital. He'd bought himself an ancient Ford Anglia for the occasion, a red one. "Oh, Bill, it's wonderful," exclaimed Adella when she saw it. "Can we afford it? For my wife and daughter, nothing is too much." He opened the door for her and got her settled with Adella wrapped in her arms. When they got to Pencil House, he told her to stay in the car while he opened up and took the bags in. Then, when he was ready, he scooped Adella, who was still cradling Sennan, into his arms and carried them both over the threshold, with Adella laughing and protesting until he placed her on the sofa. "Welcome home." He bent and kissed her. "I am so proud of you." "What on earth for?" "For making Sennan for us." "Well, it took both of us. But you did the hard work." He knelt by Adella's knee and lifted the shawl his mother had knitted for Sennan's face. "Hello, my darling. We are 3, and nobody and nothing will ever tear us apart." Chapter 6, back in Pendragon, 2018. At Marguerite Cottage, the day that Henry had left Pendragon, making Ella promise not to meet their mother when or if she came back, Adam and Kit were cooking supper. Although they were cousins, they were more like brothers. Adam, the elder, making suggestions as to how to dice an onion correctly, and Kit arguing that the kitchen was a shared domain, and if he was cooking, he'd do it his way. Adam shrugged and started to lay the table. By the way, Adam, yes, the cousin of Kit, he's a doctor. "More wine, Ella. Supper'll be a while." He poured a good slug of rosé into her glass, and she excused herself. "I'll take this into the lounge if you don't mind." The boys barely looked up as they had started a ridiculous debate about whether to put chives on the new potatoes or mint. Ella sat on the rug next to Celia and Terry, the Afghan hounds, and rubbed their ears. "Don't tell Henry," she whispered, "but I would really like to meet my mum. I wonder what she's like. Do you think she'd like me?" Terry rolled over so she could tickle his tummy. "Oh, you don't have a care in the world, do you, Terry?" She turned to Celia, who was in ear-tickle ecstasy, her eyes half shut in bliss. "Celia, you're a girl. What do you think my mum is like? Is she all bad? Selfish? Feeling guilty at what she did? Or is she funny and beautiful and clever and desperate for us to forgive her? Do you think we could be friends? I'd like that. I really, really want to know. I want to see her. Is that too bad of me?" Back in Clapham, Henry, her brother, had ditched his tea and started on the wine. The anger inside him was building. If that woman was thinking of coming back and playing happy families, she had another thing coming. But if she did come back, at least he would have the satisfaction of her seeing that, despite the pain and the chaos she had created, he and Ella had survived and done very well without her. Who needed her? She needed to be told some home truths. She needed to face up to the carnage, the wrecked lives of her parents. God bless them. Let her come and take the money and piss off back to wherever she'd come from. He didn't need her, Ella didn't need her, and he'd like that to say that to her face. She deserved to see what she left behind and know what it's like to be rejected. He took another mouthful of wine and swilled it down as he picked up his phone and, in an impulse of fury, dialed Ella's number. Ella stopped tickling the dogs and reached around for her phone. She checked the caller ID. "Oh, hi, Henry." "We are going to see her." Henry emptied the bottle into his glass. Ella felt her heart jump. "Really?" "Yes." "I'm so glad. And I am going to tell her exactly what she's done. I'm going to look her in the face and really tell her what I think of her." I think we're going to stop there. I hope that's given you a taste of coming home. It's the story of Sennan is, we get more of that as the book goes on, is quite sad, but also, she did it to herself. So thank you very much indeed for this week, and have a wonderful weekend. I hope it's full of friends and, a friend that you're allowed to meet and a cup of coffee. And, bring you some happiness and joy. Oh, So now next week, I've only got 2 more books to read to you actually. So next week is going to be The Newcomer. There he is. And that's also set in Trevet. Simon the vicar has gone off to do some work in Brazil, and a new vicar has come to stay for a year. And then the one after that is, my very latest one called Daughters of Cornwall, which came out last year in hardback and comes out this summer in paperback. And then next year, you'll get my new one. I've just got to finish writing it first. So thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday. Take care. Bye.